Now, I'm gonna try Mike Oliva.
Oliva. Close enough.
Oliva. All right, there we go. I'm glad you corrected me. So, ladies and gentlemen, join us on tonight's episode of the Trap or Dive podcast. We have the good man Mike Oliva. Mike and Dakota apparently covers the Miami Dolphins for DolphinTalks.com, and he also writes segments for the MiamiDolphins.com and is the host of the DolphinsTalk.com daily podcast. Mike's been a fan of the team himself since the early era, but it's transitioned covering the team in a professional sense for over about 20 years now. I think you said 2001. Mike, appreciate you joining us tonight, big dog. How you feeling?
Good. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing pretty good.
Good.
I can't complain, man. Look, it's Washington. Like, as you know, the situations around the league it's always important, especially when you don't have no quarterback. You start doing your research on all the available options, and for Washington, we ain't had no quarterback in 30 years. and this
Welcome to the club.
And this is one of those moments where you kind of understand a situation, not fully, but you understand there's a situation in Miami, and Tua's name has been brought up, not necessarily in terms of Washington, but in terms of his future in Miami. Mike, clearly he's had a rough start to his career, whether it's injuries, performance, or just the Deshaun Watson thing, maybe in-house disagreements between coaches and management on how they feel about Tua. It hasn't really been as smooth as it could be. But on the macro side, let's just start there. In your own words, describe the story of who Tua is and who he's been during his time in Miami.
Tua, during his time in Miami, he has been a good quarterback. The problem is the people who were drafted immediately around him have been great. So it's almost like if he was in this last year's draft with guys like Zach Wilson and Fields and all that, people would say Tua is outstanding compared to the people he was drafted around. But when you compare him to Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, it's like it's lackluster. But is that fair or is that unfair? So it's a tricky situation. He's been good in Miami, and he's been all the players on the team, like him as a person. He's been a leader. This past year, he stepped up into more of a vocal leadership role. He checks every box for what you want out of a quarterback sort of off the field. Now, there was a report that him and the head coach this past year didn't see eye to eye on some things. The head coach thought he should have been working harder on his off days. But once again, was that a head coach issue? Because everyone else seems to love the kid when it comes to off the field stuff and sort of how he sort of handles himself, how he plays. He hasn't had the success of Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, and that has hurt him. But he has been successful on the field, and he's done it almost with one hand tied behind his back. Because the Miami Dolphins offensive line was far and away the single worst offensive line unit maybe in the history of the sport. It was brutal. Their wide receiver group outside of Waddle this year, outside of Waddle this year was really not much. So he has a poor offensive line, zero running game to speak of, zero. And his wide receiver unit hasn't been great. And most weeks he played well enough to keep them in games. So as a quarterback, as a person, it hasn't been as bad as sometimes when you read in the national media how they sort of trash him. Yeah, if you compare him to Herbert and Joe Burrow, he's not that guy. And he might never be that guy. But if you compare him to the quarterbacks who were drafted last year, because you usually lump together quarterback classes and guys drafted, around the similar time frame, he's probably a little bit better than guys like Fields, Zach Wilson, and maybe even Lawrence. But although I think Lawrence has a higher ceiling by far, his numbers, they compare favorably in that aspect. So I know he gets dragged through the mud on like Fox Sports and on some of these networks with these hosts who just don't like the kid. But it's not as bad as some make it seem. But it's also, not great when you compare it to the people he was drafted around.
So, first off, DC Breeze, appreciate the follow. Appreciate you checking in. So Daniel Oyefusi of the Miami Herald reported a few weeks ago that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross will leave the decision for the next quarterback. For Tua's future with the next coaching staff. Now we spoke on it for a split second in terms of his relationship with the team. But can you give insight as to how it kind of apparently soured so quickly? Because I mean, you're just looking at him in his first year, and record wise, you know that you're winning with Tua. And then this year, obviously, there's another winning record with Tua. He misses time due to a few injuries, finger injuries and stuff like that. But just hand it to you, like, how did things sour so quickly, especially from an outsider's perspective? Because we didn't see that coming.
Yeah, well, once again, I think it all leads back to the head coach who was here, who just has. First off, I don't think he has patience for a young quarterback. That's why I think he loved Ryan Fitzpatrick, because Ryan Fitzpatrick, you know what you're going to get. It ain't always going to be great, but you know it's a veteran quarterback. I don't have to put much thought into it. He kind of knows what he's doing, and I don't have to go through sort of the rookie mistakes. With Tua, I think that's where the clash was. Brian Flores just didn't have patience for a young quarterback in general to go through the growing pains that all young quarterbacks do. It's not that Tua made more mistakes than any other rookie quarterback. He made about what an average young quarterback does. They have their ups, they have their downs, they have their games that are great, they have their games where they sort of struggle. So that's where that sort of had their falling out. I think with Mr. Ross and what he said at that press conference, when he said it at the time, he probably totally believed it. I'll leave it up to the next head coach. It's come out, though, in this search for the next head coach, they have sort of pushed on the candidates. We would like you to sort of try and fix them, at least for 2022. So I think Tua, most likely, because now they're down to Mike McDaniel and Kellen Moore, two offensive coaches who they think can at least work with him for one more year. And then, as of right now, at least, they have 2 first-round picks in 2023. Who knows if they'll still have them in a year. Then if it's not working in 2022, they can – if they have to move on, they have extra picks per the trade with San Francisco in 2023 to possibly slide up a draft board or find somebody should they need to. So I think for 2022, he's safe. I think a lot of the issues were with the head coach who's no longer there. So I think the owner and I think the general manager are going to try to support him and put him in a position to succeed. But again, if Watson falls in their lap for, say, 50 cents on the dollar, even though he has all this stuff off the field happening, could they make a move for Watson? Absolutely, because that's too good to pass up, as long as some of the off the field stuff is obviously cleaned up. And, so I think 2 is there for 2022, but that Watson thing still hangs over because it wasn't just Flores. They were all on board for Watson.
Hey, Mike, quick question. So if I'm not mistaken, the Miami Dolphins had a different dynamic than most teams in the NFL where they had co-offensive coordinators.
Yep.
And those plays that were getting called in the huddle weren't coming from those co-coordinators. They were coming from the quarterback's coach, Charlie Fry, right?
At the start of the year, yes. Then when they were like 1-4, 1-5, 1-6, they finally made a switch, and it went strictly to one of the co-offensive coordinators, George Gotze, which again shows you kind of the dysfunction of the staff and how it was put together. You have co-offensive coordinators, but neither one of them are calling the plays. A quarterback's coach who's never called plays in his life is calling the plays. It made 0 sense on all levels.
Yeah, so I was just curious, like, how do you think that really, like, played into his development? I mean, I went to a Miami Dolphins game this year, actually, when they played the Colts, but Jacoby Brissett was a quarterback. Yes. Oh my God, that was atrocious.
Brutal. But, that was the worst game all year, probably. Yeah.
But yeah, at the end of the day, like how do you feel like that stunts to his growth when he pretty much has 3 voices that he has to listen to on the offensive side of the ball, and that's not even counting the head coach. Like, do you think that dynamic had a major influence to doing his play early in the season and latter parts with it changing dynamic-wise?
Yes, absolutely. That absolutely hurt it. Now, Charlie Fry was brought to Miami partially because he had worked with Tua in some camp when Tua was still at Alabama. He had a relationship with him. He worked with him before. So he brought him there to sort of help him sort of progress in the NFL at a faster rate. It never worked because, like you said, he had 2 offensive coordinators and a quarterback's coach is calling the plays, and he has no experience ever calling plays before. And that was part of the reason they, started off slow. Part of it was he also wasn't there. Like the first or second play of week number 2, he got hurt with his ribs they got shattered because, once again, our offensive line is absolutely brutally bad, and he was out for like a month. So, but the second half of the year, yes, they beat up on teams that weren't good, but Tua played much better, partially because they did give the play calling to George Gotzi, one of the two offensive coordinators, and he was the lone voice calling plays, and he had some offensive coordinator experience when he was with Houston, so he was more of an experienced voice. He knew more about the RPO type offense that they wanted to run with Tua, and that helped, as well as once the Watson rumors sort of all went away past the trade deadline, November 3rd or 4th, I can't remember the exact day, that also helped too, because the stress of will he be here, won't he be here, is he coming, is he not coming, once that all went away for at least till the end of the year, that seemed to also not just help him Tua, but help the rest of the team, knowing, okay, this is our team from now till the end of the year, and that cloud just went away for a little while. So I think all that was a factor in how he sort of progressed as the year went on. But yes, having co-offensive coordinators and then have the quarterback coach call plays was an unmitigated disaster.
Unmitigated. That sounds like Stephen A. I love that. I love that phrase.
Stephen A.
Yeah. So one question before we get into his skill set, I just want to get into his injuries right quick. You talked about the ribs in week 2. Can you just give us context on who he is in terms of his toughness? Obviously, fractured ribs is what he dealt with this year, as well as a fractured finger. And I think he dealt with a fractured finger in his rookie year as well.
Yeah.
Just how is he in terms of being able to battle through pain, or is this like a concern, or like a legitimate concern in terms of missing time due to injuries?
The biggest red flag about him is the injuries. He is one of those guys who's always injured. It's always something. When he was at Alabama, he had a whole bunch of injuries, but the 3 major ones where he had 2 ankle injuries 2 separate times, where he had to have surgeries on his ankles. Now, there's a caveat here in that if he was at any other school, at Ohio State, Clemson, he wouldn't have had surgeries on his ankle because they would have just let him not play, rest up, and would have healed in like a month. At Alabama, don't ask me how or why, they got some weird way of doing things where they can do a certain type of surgery on your ankle and you're back in like 10 days where you don't have to wait. So he had 2 surgeries on his ankles. And, of course, the hip injury, which everyone thought could maybe end his time even as a player. There's that major injury. Then he comes to the NFL last year. Thumb injury. He misses at least 1 game. I think he might have missed 2. I can't remember. And then this year, the ribs are broken. He's out for about 4 or 5 games. Then he comes back for a week or 2. Then he hurts his thumb. It's always something. And he can play through it to a point. I'm not saying he's not tough, because these are like major injuries for the most part. We're talking about ribs being broken and stuff with your ankle and your hip. Those are major injuries. The thumb and the finger being broken by pitting it on a helmet, that's a little bit of just unluckiness that a lot of quarterbacks do at times. Can't get on for those too much, but he's always injured. I mean, you're never going to get a 16 or now 17 game season out of him in the NFL. It's always something. The biggest red flag with him is, can he stay healthy? And even if Miami has an improved offensive line, let's say, which it can't be worse. Say it's improved to just towards adequate, middle of the pack, maybe not top end of the league. How many hits can he take? Because something always seems to go on him. And it's one of the big worries that fans of the Miami Dolphins have when it comes to him is, can he stay on the field for an entire season?
Okay, Mike, I guess when he's healthy, what would you say his strengths and weaknesses are at this point in his career?
Strengths are pinpoint accuracy. This kid can throw it, and he knows exactly where it's going, and it's not going to be a little to the left or a little to the right. It's going to be exactly where he wants to go. Pinpoint accuracy, and he can navigate the pocket with his footwork extremely well. Those are the biggest strengths he has, where arm strength, it's okay. It's not the strongest in the world, but it's not bad either. It's just not great. But he has pinpoint accuracy. He can navigate the pocket, and he can sort of move when he needs to. Now, this past year, we saw him run less and sort of take off less. I think part of it is because he knows he can't take the hits that he maybe thinks he can take when you are outside the pocket and sort of running. So he knows what he can do, and he kind of knows what he can't do, which for a lot of players, a lot of quarterbacks, sometimes they don't. They all get crazy tough, and they think I can just run someone over. He knows where he has to slide or he has to get out of bounds or I can't take off here because I'm going to get drilled. So he's very smart in knowing his limitations, but the main thing is the accuracy. That's where he's very, very good.
And Mike, to kind of follow up on that, What would you say his ceiling is in this league? Do you see a guy that, I mean, you obviously say he has the pinpoint accuracy, he can navigate the pocket. Those are great traits you want to see in a quarterback. But can you see him enter the top 10 in this league at any point in his career?
Could he enter the? Yeah, I think he could. He could enter the top 10. He's not there yet. He could enter the top 10. He's never going to be top 5. Never. He's just not that guy. Top 10. Yeah, he could enter the top 10. I think he's one of those guys, though. You look at the great quarterbacks in this league. You see, the great ones we all know names: Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow. I guess you have to throw out there now, Rodgers and stuff. They elevate the play of the people around them. If the offense is having a slow day, a couple times a year, they can sort of drag a team to a win, make a few plays, and sort of lead a team. With Tua, I think everything around him needs to be going well for him to have success. When the team's having an off day, I don't know if he's the guy who's going to put the team on his back and sort of drag him to a win a couple times a year. He needs to have a solid running game. He needs to have wide receivers who can get open. He's not going to throw anybody open. He needs them to be open. He needs a lot of stuff around him to go right for him to be successful. And I don't know if that can change over time. I just don't know how long the wait would be for that to change, because I think he's more of a guy who needs help. He's not going to be that top end guy who's going to say, okay, guys, we got this. I'm going to march us right down the field and we're going to get I don't know if he's that guy.
Now, you already mentioned the pocket quarterback thing, and the last thing that we're trying to figure out is the interception part. Now, it wasn't that many interceptions in terms of like from a 17 game standpoint, just 10 interceptions on the year. But if you had to identify, because you say he's good in the pocket as a maneuvering and also as well as his pinpoint accuracy, how does he deal with processing what he's seeing? Does he see the field well? How would you label his field vision and his processing level? Is everything good on that side?
It's good. It's not bad. Could it be improved? Yes. I know there was a cornerback for the Patriots, J.C. Jackson, who trashed him after one game. After Miami beat New England, J.C. Jackson was like, Tua is awful. I'm like, dude, you sound totally like you're just mad that you lost to him. But he was trashing him, saying if he doesn't see his first read, he just sort of throws the ball up, which is not entirely true. He could be improved in that one aspect of his game. But he goes to his reads. Now, look, he loved Waddle this past year. Like if Waddle even was remotely open, he didn't even look at anybody else, threw it towards Waddle, and Waddle, he made the catch 9 times out of 10. So he loved Waddle this past year. That's why it's almost tough to answer, because he leaned on Waddle so much in 2021. Why Waddle caught like
I'm gonna say like 120 catches, right?
Yeah, something crazy like that. So he leaned on him a lot, partially because there's not much else to throw to. But so it's kind of tough to answer that question. But no, he's good. He's good at everything. I don't know if he's great at anything. That's, I guess, the best way to sort of talk about him.
So I just wanted to jump in real quick. So, Mike, what sounds scary about the two candidates that you mentioned, Mike McDaniels in San Francisco and Kellen Moore, is it seems like the primary focus is just Tua, but what about the rest of the team, Well, and then aside from that, if you were running the Miami Dolphins, what would you do for this upcoming season? Would you keep Tua? Would you possibly trade him to, say, Washington? And if you were to trade him, what would you be looking for back in compensation?
Well, it's a lot.
And also, who would you hire as head coach?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. Here's what I'll say. When you got, and you guys are fans of the Washington football team, or the Commanders now, I'm sorry.
We the Commanders now. We got to get used to it.
Your owner is always in the news, too, for stuff that's not too great. When you got a crazy owner, who are you going to get to be your head coach? Sean Payton ain't coming here. You're not getting top quality guys who want to work for them. Ron Rivera is actually somewhat of a very good get to actually work for Dan Snyder. I'll give him that. Who's going to go to Miami right now? You got to take a flyer on an unproven guy. And one of the things that they're sort of selling, either Moore or Mike McDaniel, is if you come, we're going to keep half the staff. The staff on the other side of the ball, which is very good on defense, we can keep them. So they're going to be like no now. It's an arranged marriage, which most head coaches aren't going to want. They're going to want to come in and hire their own staff and bring in all their own guys. But for a young guy, I think Moore is only 33, Mike McDaniel like 37, 38, who you have one side of the ball which plays at a high level, and the staff is going to stay. So for a young coach, you're walking into to where you can just focus on the offense, and yes, you have to work with the other staff that's already here. You might not even know them, which makes it, once again, who's going to come to Miami in that type of situation? It makes it tough to attract a quality candidate. What was your other question again?
So you had mentioned the candidate part, and AJ also asked in terms of compensation. Oh, yeah, who would you hire, and also compensation for Tua?
For Watson, it sounds like a trade is going to be at least 3 to 4 first-round picks, possibly 4, and 2 other picks, rounds 3 or 4 type. That's what it's going to take to get Watson, assuming everything's somewhat cleared up off the field. Trading for him, you probably know he's going to face some sort of a suspension, 6, 8, 12 games. So that is sort of baked into this. Even if he is found innocent of most of these charges, there's most likely going to be some sort of a suspension. So you're going to have to part with a lot of picks to get a guy you might only have for half the year. So that's why that's a crazy type of situation. For Tua to trade to another team, Miami would probably look for at least a first, maybe a third, a first and a fourth, it has to be at least a first, I think, and then something else. The something else doesn't necessarily have to be a second-round pick, but a first and a third, a first and a fourth. You probably, as long as they have somebody like Watson already in hand, they're going to want to recoup some of the picks that they traded away. So you're going to probably want a first and something else.
Whole hard in the trenches, ask a nigga what he benching, triple digits, nigga, don't forget to mention. Whole hard in the trenches, ask a nigga.